the teacher who changed everything. The rain fell gently over the small American town of Maple Creek as students hurried into Jefferson High School. Most of them laughed with friends, checked their phones, or complained about homework. Hidden among the crowd was a 16-year-old boy named Ethan Carter. Ethan walked with his head down, wearing the same faded hoodie he had owned for 3 years. His shoes were worn out, and his backpack had been stitched together so many times that it barely held his books. To most people, Ethan looked like another lazy teenager who simply didn't care about school. But no one knew the truth. Every morning before school, Ethan woke up at 5 o'clock to help his mother clean office buildings across town. His father had abandoned the family years earlier, leaving behind nothing but unpaid bills and painful memories. His mother worked 2 jobs, yet they still struggled to keep the lights on. Many nights Ethan stayed awake listening to his mother cry quietly in the kitchen after opening another overdue bill. He wanted to help her, but he was only 16. His grades continued to fall. Teachers complained that he never turned in assignments. Classmates mocked him whenever he answered questions incorrectly. Some whispered that he would probably drop out before graduation. Eventually, Ethan began believing them. One Monday morning, his English teacher announced her retirement. The students cheered, believing they would have an easy substitute for the rest of the semester. Instead, a new teacher walked into the classroom. She smiled warmly and wrote her name across the board. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks. She wasn't loud or strict. Instead, her calm confidence filled the room. "I don't just teach English," she said. "I teach people to discover the stories hidden inside themselves." Most students rolled their eyes. Ethan didn't even look up. The first assignment was simple. Write 1 page describing who you really are. Everyone finished within 30 minutes. Everyone except Ethan. His paper remained blank. Mrs. Brooks quietly approached his desk. "Having trouble?" "I don't have anything worth writing." She looked at him thoughtfully. "I don't believe that." For the first time in months, someone had disagreed with the lie Ethan kept telling himself. The next day Mrs. Brooks asked Ethan to stay after class. He assumed he was in trouble. Instead, she handed him a notebook with a blue leather cover. "This belongs to you." "I can't afford it." "You don't have to." "I'll probably lose it." She smiled. "No. I think you'll fill it." Every day after school, she encouraged him to write just 1 paragraph. Not for a grade. Not for anyone else. Just for himself. At first, Ethan wrote only a few sentences. Then a page. Then several pages. He wrote about his father's disappearance. He wrote about poverty. He wrote about fear. He wrote about watching his exhausted mother pretend everything was fine. Mrs. Brooks read every word. Sometimes she circled a beautiful sentence. Sometimes she simply wrote 3 words. "Keep going, Ethan." Those words became more valuable than any report card. Months passed. Although Ethan's writing improved, his grades in math and science continued to suffer. Other teachers had already given up. "He isn't college material," one teacher remarked during a staff meeting. Mrs. Brooks quietly replied. "Perhaps he simply hasn't met enough people who believe he can succeed." The room fell silent. She began spending her lunch breaks tutoring Ethan. When she realized he struggled with algebra, she found volunteer tutors. When she learned he had no internet at home, she arranged access to the school library after hours. When she discovered he skipped lunch to save money, she discreetly ensured meals were available without embarrassing him. She never treated him like a charity case. She treated him like someone worth investing in. One snowy December evening, Mrs. Brooks noticed Ethan sitting alone outside the school. "What are you doing here?" "My mom's working late." "Have you eaten?" He hesitated. She already knew the answer. Instead of offering pity, she invited him to help organize books in the classroom. Afterward they shared homemade soup she had brought from home. For the first time in years, Ethan experienced dinner with someone who genuinely cared whether he had eaten. That night he cried himself to sleep. Not because he was sad. Because kindness felt unfamiliar. The following spring, Mrs. Brooks entered Ethan's name into a statewide writing competition. He protested immediately. I'm not good enough. She looked directly into his eyes. You don't get to decide that before trying. Weeks later, the results arrived. Ethan had won second place. His essay, titled The Sound of Silent Heroes, told the story of ordinary people carrying invisible burdens. The judges praised its honesty and emotional depth. The local newspaper published it. For the first time, people didn't see Ethan as the poor kid. They saw him as a writer. Everything began changing. His confidence slowly returned. His grades improved. He joined the debate club. He volunteered at the public library reading stories to younger children. His mother noticed something different. You're smiling again, she whispered. I forgot what that felt like. She hugged him tighter than ever before. Senior year arrived. College applications seemed impossible. Application fees. Essays. Scholarships. Financial aid. The entire process overwhelmed Ethan. Mrs. Brooks sat beside him every afternoon. One application at a time. One essay at a time. One dream at a time. When rejection letters arrived, she reminded him they weren't final judgments. They're only directions pointing you toward the right door. Finally, one envelope changed everything. A prestigious university offered Ethan a full scholarship to study journalism and creative writing. His mother collapsed into tears. I never imagined. Ethan interrupted her. We imagined together. Graduation day filled the football stadium with proud families. When Ethan's name was announced as student speaker, many teachers looked surprised. Years earlier they had expected him to fail. Standing behind the podium, Ethan looked toward Mrs. Brooks seated among the faculty. He unfolded a handwritten speech. People think success happens because someone works hard. He paused. But sometimes success begins because one person refuses to stop believing. The audience grew quiet. There was a time when I believed I was invisible. I believed poverty defined me. I believed failure was my future. Then one teacher saw someone I couldn't see. He looked directly at Mrs. Brooks. She never rescued me. She reminded me I could rescue myself. Many parents wiped away tears. Mrs. Brooks quietly lowered her head. Years passed. Ethan graduated with honors. He became an investigative journalist whose stories exposed corruption and gave a voice to forgotten communities. His articles won national awards. Television networks invited him for interviews. Publishing companies competed for his first book. People often asked him the secret behind his success. His answer never changed. I had a teacher who refused to quit. One autumn afternoon, Ethan received heartbreaking news. Mrs. Brooks had been diagnosed with a serious illness. Without hesitation, he flew back to Maple Creek. He found her sitting beside the classroom window where everything had begun. The room looked almost unchanged. The same books. The same desk. The same peaceful smile. You became exactly who I knew you'd become, she said softly. Ethan shook his head. No. You became the reason. He placed a newly published hardcover book on her desk. The dedication read. To Mrs. Eleanor Brooks. You taught me grammar, but more importantly, you taught me hope. When the world measured my failures, you measured my potential. Every page I write belongs partly to you. Mrs. Brooks gently touched the cover. Tears rolled down her cheeks. This is the greatest gift I've ever received. Months later, she peacefully passed away. At her memorial service, hundreds of former students filled the church. Doctors. Firefighters. Artists. Engineers. Nurses. Business owners. Parents. Each carried a story remarkably similar to Ethan's. Each believed Mrs. Brooks had changed only their life. Only then did they realize she had changed hundreds. Inspired by her legacy, Ethan established the Eleanor Brooks Foundation, providing scholarships, books, mentorship, and educational support for students facing poverty and hardship. Every scholarship recipient received the same blue leather notebook Mrs. Brooks had once handed him. Inside the first page were only 3 handwritten words. Keep going, always. Years later, a young scholarship recipient nervously approached Ethan after a speaking event. I'm not sure I'm good enough. Ethan smiled. He recognized those exact words. He reached into his briefcase and handed the student another blue notebook. It belongs to you. I can't afford this. You don't have to. I probably won't finish it. Ethan smiled exactly as Mrs. Brooks once had. No. I think you'll fill it. In that quiet moment, Ethan understood something beautiful. Great teachers never truly leave the world. Their kindness echoes through every life their students touch. One person believes. One student changes. That student changes another. And another. Until hope travels farther than anyone could ever imagine. Because sometimes, the greatest lesson a teacher can give isn't found in a textbook. It's the unwavering belief that even the most broken dream can bloom when someone refuses to give up. And that is how one teacher changed everything. 5 years after establishing the Eleanor Brooks Foundation, Ethan Carter stood at the entrance of the newly opened Brooks Learning Center in Maple Creek. The old warehouse that had once been abandoned now echoed with laughter, hope, and the turning of pages. Shelves lined every wall, filled with books donated by people from across the country. Computers, study rooms, and a small auditorium welcomed students who, like Ethan once had, needed someone to believe in them. Above the entrance hung a simple wooden sign. Every child deserves one person who refuses to give up. Those words had become the Foundation's mission. On opening day, families, teachers, volunteers, and reporters gathered to celebrate. Ethan smiled as he looked around, but inside, he wished Mrs. Brooks could have been there. He imagined her standing in the front row with that gentle smile that had always made him feel capable. As the applause faded, Ethan stepped to the microphone. This center isn't about me, he began. It's about every student who has ever been told they weren't smart enough, talented enough, or worthy enough. Someone once believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Today, we continue that gift. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Among the crowd sat a quiet 14-year-old girl named Lily Harper. She clutched a worn notebook against her chest and listened carefully to every word. She reminded Ethan of himself years earlier, silent, withdrawn, and convinced that failure was inevitable. Lily's father had died in a construction accident 2 years before. Since then, her mother worked long shifts at a grocery store, leaving little time or energy for anything else. Bills piled up, and Lily often stayed home to care for her younger brother. Her grades had slipped, and some teachers had begun describing her as unmotivated. After the ceremony, Lily hesitated before approaching. Ethan. Mr. Carter. He turned and smiled warmly. Yes. I like writing. That's wonderful. But I'm not very good. Ethan recognized the fear behind those words. Who told you that? She looked down. I did. For a moment, Ethan saw his 16-year-old self standing before Mrs. Brooks. He walked to a nearby shelf and picked up a blue leather notebook. I'd like you to have this. Lily stared at it. I can't pay for it. You don't have to. What if I don't know what to write? Ethan smiled. Start with the truth. That evening, Lily opened the notebook and wrote just 3 sentences. They weren't perfect, but they were honest. The next day she wrote a page. Within weeks, she filled half the notebook with stories about grief, hope, and the dream of becoming an author. Ethan met with her every Saturday morning at the Learning Center. They read books together, discussed famous writers, and talked about life. He never criticized her first drafts. Instead, he encouraged her to keep rewriting, reminding her that every great story begins imperfectly. Months passed, and Lily slowly transformed. She participated in school discussions, joined the debate team, and even volunteered to read stories to children at the local library. Her confidence grew with every step. One afternoon, Ethan received a call from Lily's principal. I don't know what you've done, the principal admitted, but she's become one of our strongest students. Ethan smiled. I didn't change her. What do you mean? I simply reminded her of who she already was. The following spring, the Brooks Learning Center organized its first national youth writing competition. Hundreds of students submitted essays from across the United States and Europe. The winning story would receive a college scholarship and be published in a collection of inspirational essays. Lily entered with a piece titled, "The Light Someone Left On." It told the story of a girl who believed she was walking through life alone until she realized that every act of kindness left a light for someone else to follow. The judges were deeply moved. Out of nearly 5,000 entries, Lily won first place. When her name was announced, she burst into tears. Walking onto the stage, she embraced Ethan. "This belongs to you," she whispered. He gently shook his head. "No. It belongs to the girl who never stopped writing." As years passed, the Eleanor Brooks Foundation expanded beyond Maple Creek. Learning centers opened in cities and small towns, providing tutoring, mentoring, scholarships, and emotional support to thousands of struggling students. Teachers from around the world came to learn the Foundation's approach, not simply teaching lessons, but believing in people. One evening, Ethan visited Mrs. Brooks' grave carrying fresh white lilies. He placed them carefully beside the headstone. "I wish you could see them," he said softly. "The children. The teachers. The families. They're all changing because you chose not to give up on one frightened boy." A gentle breeze rustled the nearby trees. For a moment, Ethan closed his eyes and remembered the first notebook she had given him, the encouraging notes in the margins of his essays, and the quiet words that had carried him through his darkest days. "Keep going, Ethan." Those words had never left him. He smiled through tears. I kept going. Far away, inside the Brooks Learning Center, another nervous student accepted a blue notebook from a volunteer mentor. The cycle of hope continued, one life at a time, proving that the greatest teachers never stop teaching, even after they are gone. Because true education is not measured by grades alone. It is measured by the lives transformed, the dreams restored, and the courage passed from one generation to the next. And somewhere, in every child who finally believes, the spirit of Mrs. Eleanor Brooks lives on.